Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The inevitable happened on Sunday afternoon as Purdue fired Ryan Walters after a 66-0 humiliation in Bloomington. Now, the search is on for Purdue's 38th head coach as the program desperately needs momentum. We'll dive into the firing, what all went wrong, who and what may be next for Purdue here today. See how long that goes. Likely going to get into some basketball as well, fresh off the Rowdy Children's Invitational Championship over Thanksgiving, with Big Ten play coming up. But we're going to see where we're at after football here. This doesn't need to be more than an hour. So let's dive into this. If you don't already, be sure to follow on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. We'll be talking all things coaching search there. These are some of my favorite things in the world. I love the speculation. I love the drama that comes with it. Come join the conversation there. Also, lots of hoops to talk about, all of that. And send in questions on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Email boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. I'll do something again later this week, and we can talk a little bit more, answer some of your questions about both programs. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing here. Let's get into this. Ryan Walters is out at Purdue. He finishes after just 2 years, a 5-19 record, 3-15 in Big Ten play. Obviously, the nail in the coffin being a 1-11 season here in 2024, where Purdue was overall very uncompetitive. This had gotten so bad so quickly that Purdue had very little choice here. It was very well documented that Purdue wanted this to work. Of course you do. You always want it to work with your current head coach. But it was well documented that even through the struggles of this year, Purdue was kind of looking for a reason to bring Ryan Walters back, to give this a chance at a third season, with new coordinators and probably a whole new staff and, to be blunt, probably a whole new roster with the transfer portal. But this had gotten just so bad, so out of hand, and so deflating for the fan base, for the staff, for the players, that this couldn't go on any longer. There was some optimism entering 2024, and it came because Purdue did close 2023 okay, with a couple of nice wins at home against Minnesota and Indiana. And some of the names Purdue picked up in the portal were enticing, but it took just to the second game of the season for holes in the ship to be spotted. Purdue loses 66-7 and sets the school record for largest defeat in program history. Purdue just continues to look horrible in some of these games. It loses to Oregon State, who now we know is not good. It gets blown out at a Wisconsin team that finished 5-7 and missed a bowl game. It gets humiliated by all five teams that are likely to make the playoff that Purdue played. This was just such an untenable situation. And, of course, it all culminated on Saturday, last night, with a 66-0 loss to Indiana. Some of the most embarrassing stats I've ever seen. Indiana outgains Purdue 582-67. Purdue committed 5 turnovers and only had 5 first downs. A pathetic performance to really cap off what, may be the worst season in program history, and very well might be the most disappointing season in program history. There was no choice for Purdue to make here. There really wasn't. You could not have done this another year. Not with how much support you've gotten from the fans through a couple of rough years, not with the pressure that's on in this expanded Big Ten, and how difficult it is to be competitive in that landscape, with how much money is at stake now, where a percentage of the athletic department's revenue goes to the athletes, and you have to maximize revenue. I mean, this is a situation where Purdue had no real choice. And to be fair, we're going to dive deep into this. When Ryan Walters was hired, this outcome was always a possibility. It always is. There is no perfect blueprint to hiring the right coach. When Scott Frost was hired at Nebraska, it looked like a home run. When Jimbo Fisher was hired at Texas A&M, it looked like a home run. There's always the chance that it just doesn't work. And even when it looks like it's the best hire you could make, it doesn't always work. There is no perfect, set of factors that goes into this. But when you hire a first-time head coach who was just 36 years old, who had limited experience in everything, had not been a defensive coordinator for all that long, you're gambling big. And this was a very un-Purdue-like hire from the jump. It was very unexpected. I've went back and listened to my podcasts from that time, and it certainly wasn't what I expected when Purdue was having to make a hire when Jeff Brom left. But this was Purdue swinging for the fences, hoping that it struck gold with a rising star in the industry. I never felt that it was a conservative hire. I never felt that it was Purdue trying to go the cheap route, the inexpensive route. I never viewed it that way. I think Purdue genuinely believed in him. And as Purdue fans started to get to know Ryan Walters, you can see why. When he came in and was speaking with great confidence and was speaking with great conviction, it made you believe a little bit. And then he starts recruiting really well, and you see a little bit of his vision there. He won over a lot of people in his opening press conference. He always believed in himself. Even until the very end of this season, where maybe a little doubt kind of crept up in his post-game press conferences after Michigan State, and certainly last night after Indiana, you could tell that Ryan probably thought this was over. But, he had a vision of what he wanted. He wanted to build an elite defense like he had at Illinois, and he wanted to have an offense that could really put points on the board and push the ball downfield. But unfortunately, neither of those developed, and that's why we're here. To me, the first time that I really thought Ryan Walters could get fired after this season came when Graham Harrell was fired in the month of September. He was fired on September 29th after the Nebraska game, less than a calendar month into the season. And when that happened, it really made me start to wonder, boy, this isn't something where Purdue's going to make coordinator moves at the end of the year. This is 4 games in. Purdue's not messing around here. And how much of that was Ryan Walters? How much of that was, maybe Mike Babinski directing him to move on from Graham Harrell? I don't know. We will never know here. But what we do know is that left 2/3 of the season to figure it out and have improvement. And, the offense never had a clear identity. Hudson Card, I've been a bit of a defender of his, certainly did not work out how either side hoped. His career at Purdue ended last night. A really tough game against Indiana. Did not play well. He had some nice performances in there, but the offense never looked fluid. I don't always believe that you have to be attached at the hip to a certain style of play, but Purdue does have, for a very average program historically, Purdue has a very good tradition of quarterback play, of throwing the football down the field. And when Purdue has been at its best historically, offense has led the way. And There was never a vertical passing attack here. There was never an offense that was potent. I mean, Purdue finishes this year scoring less than 17 points per game and finishing last in the Big Ten in a lot of statistical categories. It was a really rough offense. And it always, the desperation showed when Ryan Walters took over the offensive play calling at Illinois. That, to me, it was another instance where I thought this was on the table, because Jason Simmons calls plays for one game and gets run out for Ryan Walters. And that really exasperated Purdue's problem here, is that Jason Simmons had to go from analyst to offensive play caller, because when Graham Harrell was dismissed, none of the normal assistants had experience calling plays. Purdue couldn't plug in a wide receivers coach or an offensive line coach, and that just continues to kind of add up to why we're here. The assistant group did not help Purdue with this, and it's not a Jason Simmons thing. I always felt bad for him and how he really got thrown into an awful spot. But, on defense, Ryan Walters wanted to run that unique system. It was highly effective at Illinois, but that unit also had elite personnel. You had Devin Witherspoon, Quan Martin, Sidney Brown, Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph. These guys are all in the NFL now, and these guys are all making plays in the NFL now. That's an NFL secondary and a couple of NFL defensive linemen in the Big Ten West, which was not known for having good offenses and good passing attacks. And, I heard this from a colleague at a game this year. Remember, Purdue's offense put up almost 400 yards on Ryan Walters' defense in 2022. Illinois had 121 penalty yards, a bunch of pass interference calls. Jeff Brom took some shots at Walters after the game in the press conference. That defense worked because a lot of factors worked in Illinois' favor, but Purdue never had that type of high-end talent, and it showed. I mean, Purdue was dead last in the Big Ten in every statistical category in 2023, and it got worse in 24. Purdue added a ton of portal pieces, but it didn't click. You give up 66 on two different occasions. You give up 38 to an Oregon State team that can't throw. 52 to a Wisconsin team that won 5 games. 49 to Penn State. 45 to Ohio State. Oregon could have named its score, and it just opted to treat it like a practice. Purdue's defense was so far away from what it was promised to be when Ryan Walters said at his introductory press conference that he is the best defensive coordinator in America. That's a big part of why we're here. And now we are here on December 1st, less than 24 months removed from Ryan Walters being named the head coach at Purdue. Purdue is looking for another football coach. This isn't necessarily a cause for celebration. Certainly Purdue fans are happy this is over, as they should be. This is an untenable situation for everyone, top down. Yes, Ryan Walters will receive north of $9 million in buyout money. He'll be fine. He's a young coach who has a nice track record as an assistant. He's going to land on his feet. Whether that comes right away or not, I don't know. He certainly doesn't need it to be right away. Ryan Walters has a fine future in this. But there are a lot more staff members who are going to be displaced by this, who don't quite have the same amount of cash coming their way from Purdue. Those are real lives that are impacted. And that's the hardest part of all of this. That is the ugly side of college sports. You look at these guys who are assistant coaches and, they move around a lot. And a lot of it is because of this. But as I said, ultimately, Purdue was not given a choice here. The results on the field made this decision for Purdue. I have no way of proving, what the fan base's impact was, but there's no way the athletic department didn't understand how upset the fan base was about this. Purdue fans were very vocal about the displeasure at this point. Purdue, you looked at social media, you looked at message boards. It was clear as day. There was not a big support group for Ryan Walters out there publicly. Privately, I have no clue. But momentum is so important in college sports right now. Fundraising, even with the House settlement, with revenue sharing, you still have to have a robust NIL collective. You have to be able to fundraise. When the writing is on the wall for a head coach, how do you keep doing that? Recruiting had turned into a disaster. As I'm sitting here right now, Purdue has what, eight or nine commits in the class that is supposed to sign on Wednesday. I mean, how many guys are even going to commit? Purdue has, looks like on On3 they have, is this 9 guys committed? 3 guys decommitted and flipped over the weekend. I mean, this was over. This was over. And now Purdue did what it had to do, and you kind of give Purdue credit for cutting bait right away. I know it's not the, popular thing to do is just sit here and praise Purdue for making what was a fairly obvious decision, but it has not been like Purdue historically to make a move on a coach after 2 years. This is rare. This is not a Purdue thing. It's become more and more frequent that you see these quick firings, but you don't see a lot of 2 years. Purdue acted quickly. Purdue saw what it needed to see. Purdue let it play out the whole season, but ultimately, Purdue's got to make a hire here. I expect that Purdue is going to go kind of in the opposite here. You see this all the time where a coaching hire doesn't work out, so the school fires him and starts fresh with the exact opposite. If it hires an old guy, it goes with the young up-and-comer. If it's got a defensive guy and he doesn't work out, they're going to the offensive side of the ball, vice versa. I have a feeling that's where Purdue's going to go here. I bet you see someone with real head coaching experience and a strong track record on the offensive side of the ball. This is a really interesting time to make a hire. Right now, you're receiving more money than ever before with media rights deals, but revenue sharing factors in next year. And there is a great deal of unknown there. That did factor into Purdue's decision. It had to. This is a pretty big deal. But Purdue probably picked an all right year to do this. The coaching market right now, and I am here Sunday, December 1st at 8:31 p.m., North Carolina is open. That's a job that I would say is probably a better job than Purdue. But the only other power conference jobs that are open are West Virginia and Central Florida. West Virginia, I would definitely say, is a lower level job than Purdue. It's in a really tough geographic location in a lesser conference. And Central Florida is an up-and-coming job. The school is growing like crazy. The program has grown like crazy. But again, Big 12, not the Big 10, way down on the totem pole in Florida. Purdue should be able to have some real options here. When you look ahead to next year, there are a lot of jobs that look likely to open next year. This year, not so much. You cannot put a price tag on a solid competitive football program. Ryan Walters made $4 million a year. That assistant pool was $5.5 million or $6 million, if I remember right. I don't remember the exact figures, but it was something around there. I would expect both of those numbers to go up when Purdue makes its next hire. I'd be very surprised if Purdue hired another $4 million head coach. I think Purdue will need to be higher than that. 4.5, 5. I don't know. I guess getting into potential candidates here, I'll preface this with I have no clue who Purdue's going to hire. This is all speculation. You start, I think, by gauging interest from these Big 12 and ACC coaches. And I say that I don't truly believe that Purdue is going to flip someone from the Big 12 or ACC. I think that's a really big ask, but I guess you never know how strong the Big 10 pull is. How much are you willing to pay? Can you pay enough to get these guys? I don't have all of these guys' salaries in front of me, but in the Big 12, you look at the state of Kansas with Lance Leipold and Chris Kleiman. You give it a shot. I mean, Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, again, I doubt it. Matt Campbell at Iowa State, has he done all there is to do there? I think so. Does he have an appetite to leave and take a new challenge? I don't know, but you find out. In the ACC, the Bill O'Briens, Brent Key's been all right at Georgia Tech. Give him a call. You reach out to some of these guys, see what the interest level is. It doesn't, I don't know. Again, I don't know that I think Purdue can get one of those guys just because we haven't seen it at a lower level Big Ten school yet. You saw Michigan State get Jonathan Smith, but you haven't seen that really happen a whole lot. I'm interested to see, if there's any reception there, but you certainly make those calls, see what the interest level is. When you look down at the group of 5 level, it's interesting. It gets tricky. The group of 5 level is going to be a bit of a hot topic because Curt Cignetti came from there. And while this is not about comparing Purdue to Indiana all the time, I know how Purdue fans operate. I know how fan bases in general operate. When your rival school beats you 66-0, has probably the national coach of the year in year one with the program, and flips it into a complete, to the best team in school history overnight, you're inclined to go that way. And there's good reason to think that. Chris Kleiman did that from North Dakota State. Lance Leipold had wanted a lot of stops. Same with Matt Campbell. The difference between Group of 5 football and Power 5 football has never been bigger. Power 4 football now, I should say. But coaching is coaching to a certain degree. In the MAC, the only 2 names that I could see making sense would be Chris Creighton at Eastern Michigan and Jason Candle at Toledo. They both come with reasons for caution. Chris Creighton has done an awesome job at one of the hardest jobs in America. Eastern Michigan is brutal. Look up the history there. It is awful, and he's done a really admirable job. He's gotten them to bowl games. He's had them beat Purdue. He's had them beat Illinois. He's done a great job there, but he has a losing record overall. Can you really hire a coach from the MAC who has a losing record? That's context-free, of course, because Eastern Michigan is a brutal place, but he has a losing record. Meanwhile, Toledo is the most resource-rich program in the MAC, and while Candle has done an all right job there, it's not like they're winning the MAC year in, year out. There is a degree of underachieving that's going on. Maybe it's a little bit like Ryan Day at Ohio State, where they're good, but they're not where they should be in the conference, given the resources. So, you proceed with caution there. In the Conference USA, Jamie Chadwell at Liberty is a name you're going to hear a ton about. He's an offensive guy. He won at Coastal Carolina. He's winning at Liberty. Had them in the group of 5 spot of the New Year's Six last year. Didn't have a great year this year by Liberty standards. He makes a lot of money at Liberty. That's a really complex program to evaluate. I don't know how much you do or don't know about Liberty University. There's a lot going on there. It has a lot more money than anyone else in the Conference USA by a mile. So, is he looking to move on right away? Hugh Freeze did a good job there, and he's not done great at Auburn. So, I don't know that Liberty's a great indicator. He does have the offensive background. It's in a very different way. We'll see. I'm very curious to see how long that name stays in the conversation. Tyson Helton at Western Kentucky was kind of rumored to be the runner-up last year or 2 years ago when Purdue made this hire. Again, offensive side of the ball guy. Western Kentucky's fine. They're not great, but Purdue's last Western Kentucky coach worked out, and I don't know that Western Kentucky was exactly a world beater under Jeff Brom, though it was good. What were the hesitations last time, though? Are those hesitations that could be addressed? I don't know. Was it something where, he's not a candidate now? I have no clue. One big name over in the American, John Sumrall at Tulane has probably the best team in the group of five this year, or at least right up there. He seems to be a kind of a rising star. Sounds like he's going to be a real contender at North Carolina. That's going to be a big one. You have James Madison. Bob Chesney was a guy who came from the lower levels. I think he was at D2, maybe FCS before James Madison. Another guy who's won everywhere he's been. Only 1 year at James Madison. Only 1 year of FBS experience. You're going to hand the keys of a Big Ten program over to that. I don't know. Like Clay Helton at Georgia Southern. Didn't do great at Southern Cal, but very different job there than what you'd have at Purdue. Offensive guy. One name that I think could be interesting off the radar is Dan Mullen. He's been out of it for a couple of years now. His time at Florida ended a little bit controversially because he was not a Bulldog recruiter the way you have to be if you want to beat Georgia. And that's kind of your job at Florida, is to be better than Georgia. And he was not wanting to recruit at that level. Well, at Purdue, you don't have to do that. Purdue is never going to be that. Purdue is never going to recruit at a championship level. So it's a different gig. He was great at Mississippi State, had some great offenses. He took Mississippi State to number 1 in the country back in 2014. So that's, something to keep an eye on. Maybe he'd be in the mix. There are plenty of names out there. You'll hear Jamarcus Shepard. I have my real skepticism that Purdue is going to go with another young guy with no head coaching experience. And as far as I'm aware, Jamarcus Shepard has never called plays before. He's just kind of been a position coach and co-OC. I'd be shocked if that happened. I would be stunned. Charles Huff at Marshall, I've heard. I don't know. I don't know that I see that. Maybe. He did beat Notre Dame, but I don't know there. The Service Academy guys, Calhoun and Munkin, that's a really different job. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know where Purdue's going to go here, but I do think offensive side of the ball, experience at head coach, that's the blueprint Purdue's going to follow. If it strays, I'd be pretty surprised. But I've been surprised before. And we'll see how this goes. But this is a critical hire. Purdue can't get this wrong. You can't have back-to-back disaster hires. You really lose the fan base at that point. I remember the fan base was dwindling by the end of Danny Hope's tenure. Interest was low. Attendance was poor. and it showed. Everyone knew it. And then when Darrell Hazel was even worse, interest was non-existent. It was bad. Purdue can't afford to get back to that point. Purdue averaged wonderful attendance figures this year. You can't lose all of that. You're going to have a dip. That's undeniable. But what does Purdue do? How does Purdue handle that? We'll find out. The Big Ten TV contract goes through 2030, and when that is being renegotiated, I'd want to be competitive. That doesn't have to be 9-3 every year, but I wouldn't want to be 1-11. I wouldn't want to be last in every single defensive category in the conference. I wouldn't want to be scoring 17 points a game. I'd want to be a lot more competitive there in 27 and 28 when this thing is being renegotiated. When you look at the schedules, next year is going to be rough. I mean, that is something where, with this, I think Purdue is going to have to really promise a long leash for the next coach. I don't think there's anything wrong with firing Ryan Walters after year 2, but your next coach, you are not firing after year 2. He's coming into a tougher spot where, the transfer portal opens in a week. And I don't know that I think Purdue's in a great spot to keep a lot of its guys. I also don't think Purdue's in a spot where it really has to keep all of his guys. We can talk a little bit about this later in the week too, but going to be an interesting spot for a coach to come into. But look, that's what I have here for football. I'm going to hit the ad read here. We will get into basketball, but Purdue finishes the year 1-11. Ryan Walters is out, and Purdue now will begin its search for the next head coach. 2024 is coming to an end, and there were so many highlights of this year. While it may not have qualified as a highlight, did you review your insurance coverages with a professional this year? If not, give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com. We'll go over your current insurance program for free with no obligation to even receive a quote, and we'll talk some Purdue sports in the process. Reach out today, and we'll knock it out before the end of the year, no matter where you are in the state of Indiana. On a much more positive note for Purdue fans, though, Purdue basketball wins the Ratty Children's Invitational out in San Diego. 71-61 win over NC State, 80-78 wild one that Purdue comes back to steal from Ole Miss. Purdue now 7-1 on the year. It wins the MTE for the 4th year in a row. This was Purdue's play hard mantra personified. This is exactly what you're looking for there. Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Wren were as competitive as it gets out there. And they always are, but you really saw it come through. While Fletcher Lawyer is on the surface cool as a cucumber, deep down, he's a really competitive guy. And his, he does the small things well to where it didn't feel like he had some huge tournament, but you look at the stats and pretty damn good. Camden Heide and Miles Colvin competed hard. Jakari Harris did not back down. Caleb First always gives 100%. You saw it in that NC State game. Purdue played a lot harder than NC State did. And that's what helped Purdue run away from that thing in the second half. And against Ole Miss hit Purdue with punch after punch. It was making a lot of threes. It forced some turnovers. But ultimately, it's Purdue playing hard and getting a tip in after a Braden Smith air ball. Miles Colvin doesn't quit on the play when Ole Miss defenders do. I think Ole Miss defenders just thought it was going to overtime. Colvin scoops in there for the tip in, and Purdue wins. Tremendous performance from Trey Kaufman-Renn out there. He wins the tournament MVP award in a no-brainer, really kind of showing himself as a star on the national scale. I don't know how many, of the national eyeballs were on this. It wasn't exactly the biggest event of Feast Week, but man, he had a great game against Alabama earlier this year in a highly discussed game. He's great in this. He should be getting these discussions as an all Big Ten player, no doubt. He is really becoming the next big-time Purdue post player. He's not a 7-footer. He's not just a true giant the way Purdue has had, but he's averaging 19 and 7 so far. You could not have asked for a better start to the season from him. He's been terrific. Miles Colvin and Camden Heide, just phenomenal in this event. They each had their day. Camden Heide's really big in the NC State game. Miles Colvin more so in the Ole Miss game. We talk about this, and Matt Painter talks about this, where when you're not one of the 2 or 3 top guys, it's hard for consistency to really be a big part of your game. But what you can do is play your role well. These guys both let the game come to them. Miles Colvin is doing a great job of maximizing his value as a rebounder and as a defender and letting the offense come to him. He's not forcing anything. He's really playing well all around right now. He has been awesome for Purdue. You see it on the first play of that Ole Miss game when he has a pick-6 dunk. You see him making hustle plays. You see him, grinding on defense, things you wouldn't have seen a year ago. That's growth. That's a sign of a good program. Camden Heide, playing hard, really developing and embracing the physicality, knocking down shots. I mean, he's, the Cobra stats on Twitter, awesome job over on the Gold and Black message boards too. Heide has one of the best effective field goal percentages ever. He doesn't take bad shots. He's efficient as can be. He knocks down a bunch of threes. Great weekend for those two. Just really good stuff. Purdue's got a really nice starting 5 right now. Now, off the bench, look, it's a bit of a question mark. Purdue's really trimming the rotation here. It was very notable. Wilberg did not play a second in San Diego. I think the writing has been on the wall there a little bit. Purdue is going to need him in some games this year. Whether it's just someone to throw at Umar Ballo and bang a little bit, whether it's a foul trouble situation with Trey Kaufman-Renn, and you got to have someone out there. He'll be needed at times, but I think you're seeing his role really dwindle. Raleigh Burgess only checked in once, if I'm remembering right. I think he came in when Trey Kaufman-Renn went out in the game against NC State, but he didn't play much. Had Daniel Jacobson stayed healthy, maybe this would look different. Maybe Purdue wouldn't really be going small a whole lot. But Purdue has really embraced the small. That whole theory and the whole criticism that Matt Painter doesn't like to adapt or is real stubborn is not aging well here. That's nonsense. Purdue is really embracing a different style of play, and so far, so good. Jakari Harris is doing some really good things defensively and competitively, but the three-point shooting is a little troubling here. He's 3 for 20 from outside this year. Teams are going to keep leaving him wide open until he shows he can make them. That's what they're doing right now. And, not everyone has to be a great shooter, but the way Purdue likes to play, boy, you need capability there. And we'll see what we see as the season moves on, but a little bit of a red flag there. CJ Cox had a small tournament There's going to be growing pains for these freshman guards. Caleb First is high floor, low ceiling. He's not a perfect player. He's not a great scorer, but he does give you some really good things defensively as a rebounder. He can finish around the basket better than your other options at the 5. He's going to play a key role for Purdue this year. Purdue beats 2 athletic teams. I know it wasn't always pretty against Ole Miss, and NC State did hang around for a while, but these are 2 really athletic teams. I don't want to get too big picture, but right now, this is not a great Purdue team. This isn't like a top 5 team in the country, but I think it's a pretty clear-cut top 20 team or so. It's doing the little things really well. And that's the sign of a great program, is when the little things that mean a lot to winning are being done on a night-in, night-out basis. And that's really raising your floor for a year where you're good. This is a good team, don't get me wrong. But I don't think it's great. Purdue's got 2 wins, though, over big-time SEC teams. And I know you never thought there'd be the day when I would call Alabama and Ole Miss big-time in basketball. But that SEC money is bleeding into basketball. These programs have decided they want to be good. The last time most people in Indiana heard of Ole Miss basketball, it was when Bryce Drew was crushing Ole Miss's soul in 1998 in the NCAA tournament. But with Chris Beard at the helm, say what you want about him, the guy can coach. They're legit. They're good. Same deal with Alabama. Bama decided it wanted to be good. Hires Nate Oates. It's good. These wins should age really well for Purdue. I don't have if it's top 50 net at a neutral for quad 1, top 25 net for home. I mean, it's pretty reasonable that these could be 2 quad 1 wins for you. And to have that done in the month of November, boy, pretty good. Pretty good indeed. Big Ten play starts now. And you have 2 early games here this week. Thursday, you're at Penn State. Sunday, you have Maryland at home. This is where you can put yourself in a rough spot. Remember 3 years ago now when Purdue loses on the buzzer beater from Ron Harper and Piscataway, and then in the first game after New Year, Johnny Davis goes ballistic on Purdue, and Purdue's 1-2 in Big Ten play. That was a hole that Purdue could never dig out of. It lost a heartbreaker at Wisconsin. It lost a buzzer beater at Michigan State. Lost on the Rob Finney shot. Lost a few games. But it was those early losses that loomed so large. That's what Purdue has to avoid here. These are respectable opponents. These are not great opponents. But if Purdue doesn't come out and play well, it could lose one of them. And if you're trying to be in position to win a 3rd Big Ten title in a row, getting off to a 2-0 start would go a long way. It would go a really long way. I don't think the Big Ten is great this year. You can look around the country on Feast Week, and Oregon had a nice win over Alabama. Illinois had a nice win over Arkansas, but not so great for Indiana. Not so great for Ohio State. I think I saw they lost to someone. Rutgers lost to Kennesaw State last week. Not necessarily fantastic for the Big Ten. So this looks very achievable. Right now, Purdue probably looks like the best team in the league. But again, there's a very long way to go. And this is kind of the first step for Purdue. But boy, you look at November, and while it wasn't perfect, Purdue's 7-1 here. Just kind of looking at KenPom, the defense is not where you want it to be yet, but Purdue's taking care of the basketball okay. It did a nice job against NC State. It did a nice job against Alabama. It's shooting wonderfully from three-point range, 42%. It's doing a really good job. Offense is great. Defense has a ways to go. I don't think this is going to be a great defensive team, but I think it can do some all right things. It's limiting opponents from three-point range, doing some all right stuff here. I think it's a sign of where Purdue's program is, that it's where it's at right now, but it's a big month of December here. You have these two Big Ten games, you have two more SEC teams, and then you play Toledo. Wow. Purdue only plays 5 games in December. That's kind of wild. Finals and Christmas. That's crazy. But, Auburn's number 1 in KenPom right now. Auburn won Maui. Auburn's great. Texas A&M looks good enough. Beat Creighton, beat Rutgers, beat Ohio State. Not bad. You got 2 Big Ten games. These are going to be battles. These are all going to be big. These are all going to be really big, but Purdue's got a great opportunity ahead of it here. Guys, that's all I've got for today. This was a long one, but thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for listening. We'll be here throughout this whole coaching search. Tentatively, I will plan on doing something again later this week. We'll see what we have from a coaching perspective. If it's nothing, maybe we'll talk again Sunday after this Maryland game, but stay tuned on Twitter @BoilersBeyond. Send in any questions you have for me there or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. We'll be back later this week, early next week with more, but I look forward to it, guys. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I'll talk to you then. Take care.